Webhooks and Subworkflow are very powerful N8N nodes. However, people don't understand how to use them correctly or how they really work. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how they work and how you can use them in real business scenarios. Let's get into it. Let's start by giving a definition of what a webhook is so that we are all on the same page. A webhook is a way for one system to notify another system that something happened and send data with it. What does it mean? Let's imagine that we have system A, and in system A, something happens, and I give you here a few examples. Once something happens on system A, here, if we have a webhook, we are going to notify system B and send the data that are coming from system A. So what it really does is just simply notifying, hey, something happened, there you go, the data. We are just sending data throughout the web. Example of these are, someone books a meeting. If I have a webhook, I can send the data somewhere else. Like, hey, the data of the guy that booked the meeting are name, surname, email, phone number, so on and so forth. Or someone changes an entry in a CRM. Let's imagine that you are sending a proposal and to someone, and you sent the email. Maybe once that email is sent, the CRM automatically is updated, right? So what happens is system A, so email is sent, then system B received the data, so the email sent, and updates something else. And lastly, the opposite, right? A leads send you an email, hey, I want to book a call with you. And maybe with the webhook, we can automatically shoot back, I don't know, a Calendly invite or an out of office message or a message to say, hey, happy to collaborate and so on and so forth, right? So once again, all it does is system A does something. Once this thing happens, we're sending it to system B. Now, in N8N, and we're going to use a specific service for this, which is Postman API that now we're going to open. But in N8N, how are we going to access the webhooks? Like this, typing webhooks right here. And here we see that we have the URL, which is the address that we will use in order to send or receive the data, right? And then we will have a method, which is not the intent of this video, however, is simply how we pass the data. Get means that we are receiving them. Post means that we are sending them. And with these two, you're okay for mostly 99% of the use cases that we have in the web. Good. So now let's make a webhook in practice. So the platform that we're going to be using is this platform right here called Postman API. And once you're going to press on it and you're going to log in and give the data and usual accesses, you're going to land in this interface. Now, right here, we're going to press on workspaces and we're going to create one in case it's your first time, right? So blank, we're going to press next. And here we're going to call it trying N8N webhook internal, and we're going to go create. On the side of overview right here, you will press plus. And you will have the possibility of right here starting to send or receive data. And why we see this? Because here we have the symbol of the HTTP request, which is how we are, sending data throughout the web. Now, what do we want to use? We want to put here a URL or an address. In order to do this, we're going to go back to N8N and we're going to double press on webhook and get this webhook right here. Actually, this URL right here. We're going to go back to Postman and we're going to paste it here. Now, what do we want to do? We want to send data, right? So we're not receiving, we are sending from Postman to N8N. So this request will become post. As I explained, like get is when you receive the data, post is when you send them. For this example, we want to send them. And also we want to update here the post method also in N8N. Now, what do we need to do here and what do we see? Now, here we see a lot of things, parameter, headers, body, and so many things. Now, why is that? Because when we send a webhook, we said data across the web. And in order to understand all of these things, let's imagine that we are sending a letter, right? So this is our letter, fantastic letter, and etc. When inside this letter, we have all of the information that we need. So the letter itself, it's the request or the ask that we have, right? We want to have the information. We are sending this letter across the web. And this letter right here is the request itself. Now, inside the request, we have headers, because inside the letter, if we want to send a letter somewhere, we need to have a stamp, and this stamp basically represents the top line information that we have for a request. In our case, is for the letter, we are saying, okay, it's fragile, it's air express, whatever, right? We're not sending the content, we're not sending the address, we're just saying on a top level how you should treat this package. And this is exactly what we send across the web. And we say, hey, the language that we're going to be using, it's English, for example, or in our example, the content will be in JSON. So we're just giving top line information on how they should be managing the box or the letter that we are sending through. Then we have the parameters. And the parameters right here are the specific information in the example of this for the address of the letter, right? So, I don't know, send it to Luxembourg, to this address, to this person, and so on and so forth. So these are the details that we need to send this thing to. And if you notice in any URL, you will notice that after you have the HTTP whatever, you have a question mark, and then you will have a lot of things coming after. All of these are the parameters, right? And these, again, give the address. So where do we need to send all of these info? Now that we understood this, inside the letter, so right here, we will have the letter itself. So let's imagine, dear sender, I wanted to know how you were, what's happening in your life, so on and so forth. And this is the body. So the body is the content itself. And for this very reason, now that we want to try and send things across the web in order to see if we manage or we don't manage, we're going to go in the body section because this is the raw data, right? We're going to press raw in case it's not pressed. And you see that, and you know actually, but you also see it from here, right? That the way in which we send things is JSON. So if you don't know JSON, I made a video of 15 minutes. I will link it here. And you can go and check it out. It's super simple and it will just break it down for you step by step. So you know that the syntax is between square, curly brackets, and we're going to have a key, which we call it, key, let's call it body. If I can press the right thingy with the keyboard. Okay. And then here we're going to say this is the value. Okay. So an example of this could be, I don't know, name. So let me make it like this. So name, and the value could be my name, which is Giovanni. So Giovanni. Okay. Now, let's check if we are receiving it. So we're going to go right here. We're going to press listen for test event. And once we go right here and we press send, what we should be expecting is that in here, now we know that we're not going into the headers because again, that is what we said, it's the stamp. We're not going into the parameters. We're not going into the query, but we're going into the body. And we see that we sent the right data. Okay. Now that we have this, what do we notice? We notice that here we have a message, which is workflow was started. But I don't really know if the workflow was successful or not. And so I am in need now of doing the opposite process, which is now I sent the data to n8n. Now I would like n8n to send the data to Postman API because we're playing around with webhooks right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a response to Webhook. And we are going to respond with probably a text. And here we're just going to answer in plain text, right? So here we say, hey, Joe, the workflow has finished successfully. Perfect. Now, one thing that we need to do before doing this, and now you will notice, is that when we were creating our webhook, we have that we responded to this immediately. Now, we don't want to respond immediately, right? Because we want to receive the data, then go on the second node and then answer only with the second node. So for this very reason, in here, we have an option which is using respond to webhook node. And here it means basically that the data will come in, will go here. This node will process, will shoot it here. This node will process, and then only here they will go back to Postman API. So let's now try and see. We again execute the workflow. The workflow, as you can see, will be listening. And we're now going to send the same data. Here, now, if the workflow is successful, we will see, hey Joe, the workflow has finished successfully. So this is the two-way door, let's say, that you have in order to send the data. Now, why is this useful and how you can apply it to a business scenario? This is very useful because let's imagine that, I don't know, you are creating a voice agent, okay? Or a website. It's the same thing as a concept. You're going to have that the data, let's do the example of the voice agent. The data come in from whatever service, right? Let's imagine that I am chatting with voice. So I'm going to have that the voice come in. Once the voice message is sent from a customer, the voice agent will listen. Once this will listen, it will trigger the workflow. It will do a lot of steps in the middle because just right here, you can add as many steps as you want, right? Like you can add an AI node or whatever. And then only once everything is finished and it will go right here, the thing will be processed and we will be able to send back the data. And as we saw, we can send them back in a customized way. And that's very powerful because this allows you to have a lot of flexibility. Now, you might ask, okay, but do I have every time to press execute workflow? The answer is no, because when you push, and we say in technical terms, to production, we just activate the workflow with this toggle right here. And what's going to happen is that at this point, the URL is changing because now we are in the production URL. So you're just going to take the URL, copy it, post it right here, paste, and now you will see that I will just now refresh for you to see that there is no more green ticks. I'm now going to go right here. I'm going to send it, and you will see that it will process and it will be okay. Again, successful. And if I now go in my executions, you will see that I now did this, and I can try and use different data if you want. However, if you go right here and you double click, you will see that the execution mode is production. And my name is Giovanni. And again, right here, you will also be able to see, again, not on the headers, not on the parameters, not on the query, not on the body, because at this point we are sending, but that everything works successfully. And we have execution mode. So these are, in simple terms, how Webhook works and how you can apply it to real business situations. Let's now move to subworkflows. A subworkflow now is basically a workflow which is called by another workflow to execute a specific piece of job, okay? And why is this useful before going into examples? Because let's imagine that you are creating a way to scrape website. Now we will make it, but the concept is, let's imagine that I create a scraping infrastructure or some part of workflow that I know for a fact that I will be able to reuse in more than one workflow, and I don't want to build everything from scratch each time, right? The way to do it is to create a sub workflow that you can call, and you know that that specific piece will do a specific type of job. Why is this useful? This is very powerful because specifically when you start delivering automation to businesses, like I scaled mine to more than 50K in less than 5 months. But one of the things that you will notice once you start scaling is that most of the things that you do are templatable and reusable. And that is, by the way, a very important skill for you to develop in the course of your journey to create an AI agency. And the more you manage to template, the more you shrink the time to deliver, and the more ROI you have, right? For every unit of time that you spend, you get more dollar per unit back. So for this very reason, we're now going to touch this topic, and that it's extremely valuable. So I really care about this topic. And let's have a simple automation. Now, we want to start this automation manually. And what I want to do is I want to use this automation to scrape website. I want to create a scraping automation, right? I will add a edit node, right? Just because it's simple and it's easy to understand. And I can say that, I don't know, this first field is called URL. And here I can paste the URL that I want. Now, let's go quickly into Hacker News, which is a very nice website that we use for practice and scraping activities. And I'm going to copy the URL, go right here and paste it. Okay. So now if I execute the workflow, I don't have anything scraped, right? I just have the URL. Now, I don't want to scrape it here, even though now the example is easy, like meaning that I have, I don't know, an HTTP request and many other stuff, but I want to use a sub workflow. I press right here and I start pressing executing sub workflow. And the action is execute a sub workflow. Once I press it, I need to see here that I need to insert from a certain workflow list a workflow right here that I should have previously created. So what does it mean? What does it mean? It means that I somehow need to call another workflow that I already created to do the job that I want. Let's now create a new N8N page. So I'm going to go in something new and let's create this new workflow that we are supposed to be calling. Now I called it already sub workflow right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call execute sub workflows. So I am just going to, execute sub workflow. And the trigger is when executed by another workflow. And I'm going to go here, press accept all data, which means send me everything that you have. You will notice that the whole workflow runs successfully. And if I now select sub workflow, my apologies, you will notice that the whole workflow runs successfully. And I got exactly the same output because the other sub workflow doesn't do much, right? However, if I go here, I don't have visibility on the data. And that's a problem. And that's the tricky part of these sub workflows. And the reason is that here, the only way you have to access it is to go into the execution. And if you press, then you're going to be able to see the data that you sent, right? So for this very reason, I'm going to go here and press copy to editor. And this will allow me to now open and see the data that I'm passing. So at this point, I now have the option of HTTP request and I can drag it in. Now I can execute and I can start seeing all of the steps that I can do. Now, let's imagine I want something more. So I want some markdown and I just transform HTML to markdown. And I now made a very, very simple, let's not even clean it. It's totally fine. It's just an example. But you will now see that instead of having now the URL, if I now execute and I unpin the data and save, you will see that my output now is exactly the last step of the previous sub workflow. And why is this helpful? This is helpful because let's imagine now that we are creating a scraping infrastructure or something that, allows you to gather information from company website. And maybe you are building a targeted list of ICPs and then you are enriching them. And then you have all of the standard process. And then maybe you're doing it across industries, right? So what you're going to change is probably the prompt for the LLM, but not the way you scrape the data. So this allows you to create something that it's templatable and it's reusable. And this means basically that if you can manage to standardize something, then the $M of return that you have per unit input, it's going to increase. So with that being said, I really hope the video was valuable and that you now get an overall understanding of what webhooks and sub workflows are and how you can apply them to businesses or what are the use cases that you can use. If you want access to the template of this in order to see how I mapped the data and how I did it, you can find it in my school community in the first link down below, and which is also where I teach 9-to-5ers how to land their first paid clients in AI automation. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.